The resonance had spread beyond the archive, its effects rippling across the planet like a storm unleashed. Elira stood at the edge of the central chamber, her cybernetic hands trembling as she clutched the empty manuscript. Its glow had faded, but faint traces of energy still pulsed within it, as though it was alive and waiting for something or someone to awaken it fully. Around her, the texts shifted and rearranged themselves, forming new patterns and meanings. Some books glowed faintly with an inner light, their pages flickering in shades of crimson, gold, and electric blue. Others crumbled into dust as their contents were rewritten, their voices lost once more to the void. The very fabric of reality seemed to be unraveling, and with it, the Dominion's control over history. "The texts are fighting back," Kale said, his voice heavy with awe and fear. "They're reclaiming what was stolen." Elira nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky burned with shifting colors, crimson streaks intertwined with veins of violet and gold, pulsing in time with the resonance emanating from the planet's core. It was as if the universe itself was remembering, its forgotten memories surfacing like scars on the surface of existence. "But at what cost?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of energy filling the chamber. "Every word that rewrites itself erases something else. We're not just reclaiming history, we're rewriting it." Kale frowned, stepping closer to her. His expression was a mixture of determination and unease. "And what happens when the Dominion realizes what we've done? They won't let this stand. They'll come for us, and they won't stop until every trace of this is gone." "They already know," Elira replied firmly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "That's why they'll come for us. But this time, we'll be ready." Before they could prepare further, the ground trembled violently. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the chamber, shaking the shelves of ancient tomes and sending fragments of crumbling manuscripts cascading to the floor. The sound was followed by the unmistakable roar of Dominion warships descending from orbit, their engines tearing through the atmosphere like a prelude to destruction. "They're here," Kale muttered grimly, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer carried. Elira didn't respond. She opened the manuscript once more, its blank pages glowing faintly with threads of light. Words began to form, written not in ink, but in fragments of energy that pulsed with an otherworldly intensity. "Remember us. Do not let them silence our song. We were here." The message was clear. The texts were not just records of the past. They were voices of those who had been erased. And they were calling out to her, urging her to act. "We need to move," Kale urged, glancing toward the entrance. His voice was tense, his eyes darting between the door and the glowing artifact in Elira's hands. "Not yet," Elira said resolutely, her grip tightening on the manuscript. "There's one last thing I need to do." She led Kale deeper into the archive, weaving through corridors lined with towering shelves of ancient texts. The air grew heavier with each step, charged with an energy that hummed faintly against their skin. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with light, as though the archive was alive and aware of the events unfolding within it. Finally, they reached a hidden chamber buried beneath layers of ancient data cores. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a crystalline sphere containing a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The sphere radiated an intense energy, casting vibrant reflections across the room and illuminating the intricate carvings etched into the walls. "The memory core," Elira explained, her voice filled with reverence. "It remembers everything. Every word, every song, every story. It's the link between the Codex and the Great Chorus." Kale frowned, studying the sphere. "What does it do?" "It remembers," Elira replied simply, "and now it will sing." As she approached the pedestal, the sphere began to pulse in time with the manuscript in her hands. Fragments of text floated around her, forming a spiral of light that connected the two artifacts. The air grew thick with energy, and the hum of resonance intensified, filling the chamber with a symphony of voices that spoke of loss and longing, of betrayal and redemption. "This is how we fight back," she said, her voice steady despite the growing tension, "by giving the chorus a voice." Kale stepped forward, his expression uneasy. "And what happens to us?" "We become part of the song," Elira replied, "like everyone else who's been erased." Before Kale could respond, the chamber doors burst open, revealing a squad of Dominion soldiers clad in sleek, black armor. Their weapons were trained on Elira and Kale, their faces obscured behind reflective visors. "Step away from the artifact," one of them commanded, their voice amplified through distorted speakers. Elira didn't move. She raised the manuscript high, its pages glowing brighter with each passing second. "If you want to erase us," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber, "you'll have to rewrite every last word." With that, she placed the manuscript on the pedestal, aligning it with the memory core. The moment the manuscript touched the memory core, the entire chamber erupted in a blinding flash of light. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and the hum that had been building in the background crescendoed into a deafening symphony. Fragments of text floated around Elira and Kale, forming a swirling vortex of glowing words that pulsed with life. Each fragment carried a voice, a memory, a piece of history that had been erased but now fought to be heard. The Dominion soldiers fired their weapons, beams of energy slicing through the air. But the attacks dissipated harmlessly against an invisible barrier that surrounded the pedestal. The glowing text formed a protective shield, their voices rising in unison to create a haunting melody that resonated through the chamber. It was as if the very fabric of reality was bending to protect what had been reclaimed. "You have awakened the final note," a resonant voice echoed through the chamber. It was the silent choir, their ghostly figures emerging from the light. Their forms were ethereal, their robes shimmering like liquid glass, their faces obscured by masks that reflected fractured hues of crimson, gold, and violet. They moved with an unnatural grace, their presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. One of them stepped forward, placing a hand on Elira's shoulder. Though their face was hidden, she felt their presence, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "The chorus remembers," the figure said, its voice a blend of countless others, layered and harmonized. "And now, so must you." Elira's cybernetic hands trembled as she absorbed the weight of the moment. She could feel the voices of the forgotten coursing through her, their memories merging with her own. It was overwhelming, yet empowering. For the first time, she truly understood the scale of what had been lost and what they were fighting to reclaim. Kale stared at the silent choir, his expression a mix of awe and disbelief. What are they?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the symphony of voices. "They're the voices of those who refuse to be silenced," Elira replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "They're the ones who recorded the unwritten war. They're the scribes." The silent choir raised their arms in unison, their movements fluid and deliberate. The glowing fragments of text spiraled outward, forming a radiant web of light that enveloped the chamber. The Dominion soldiers froze, their weapons lowered as the voices of the forgotten echoed in their minds. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the very fabric of reality had shifted, revealing glimpses of a past that had been erased. What is this?" one of the soldiers stammered, their voice trembling with fear. "The truth," Elira replied, her voice resolute. "Something you've tried to erase, but can't." As the web of light expanded, the Dominion soldiers began to dissolve, their forms reduced to shadows that faded into nothingness. The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the memory core. The glowing text settled back into place, their voices quieting but not disappearing entirely. Kale approached Alira cautiously, his expression grim. "What just happened?" "The scribes spoke," Alira replied, her gaze fixed on the memory core. "They showed the Dominion what they've forgotten." "And what did they forget?" Kale pressed, his tone urgent. "The unwritten war," Alira said, her voice heavy with meaning. "A conflict that predates the Silence War. A war that was never meant to be remembered, but must never be forgotten." Kale frowned, studying the glowing sphere. "And what does this mean for us?" "It means we're running out of time," Alira replied. "The Dominion knows we've awakened something they can't control. They'll come for us again, and next time, they won't hold back." Before Kale could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The walls of the chamber began to crack, fractures of light spreading across the surface like veins. The memory core pulsed erratically, its glow shifting between hues of crimson and violet. "What's happening?" Kale shouted over the growing hum. "The resonance, it's destabilizing," Alira replied, her voice tense. "We've unleashed something ancient, something powerful. If we don't stabilize it, it could tear the planet apart." "Then what do we do?" Kale demanded, his voice filled with urgency. "We finish what we started," Alira said firmly. She opened the manuscript once more, its blank pages glowing faintly with threads of light. Words began to form, written not in ink but in fragments of energy. "Remember us. Do not let them silence our song. We were here." Alira closed the book, her resolve hardening. Whatever came next, she was ready. For the first time in centuries, the voices of the forgotten had been heard, and they would not be silenced again. She turned to Kale, her expression determined. "We need to get to the surface. The resonance is spreading, and we're the only ones who can stop it." Kale nodded, though his expression remained grim. "Then let's move." But we're not doing this alone. As they made their way back through the archive, the world around them felt different. The air was heavier, charged with an energy that hummed faintly against their skin. The stars flickered unnaturally, their light bending as if caught in some unseen current. "This isn't right," Kale muttered, his voice tense. "The resonance, it's spreading," Alira said quietly, her tone resolute. Kale turned to her, his expression grim. "And what about the Dominion? What happens when they realize what you've done?" "They'll come for us," Alira replied firmly. "But this time we'll be ready." She opened the manuscript once more, its blank pages glowing faintly. Words formed, written in threads of light. "Remember us. Do not let them silence our song. We were here." Alira closed the book, her resolve hardening. Whatever came next, she was ready. For the first time in centuries, the voices of the forgotten had been heard, and they would not be silenced again. As Alira and Kale emerged from the archive, the world around them had transformed. The sky was a swirling canvas of crimson and gold, streaked with veins of violet that pulsed in time with the resonance emanating from the planet's core. The air was thick with energy, charged like the calm before a storm. Every breath felt heavy, as though the weight of centuries pressed down on them. The ground beneath their feet trembled intermittently, cracks of light spreading across the surface like scars. In the distance, Dominion warships descended from orbit, their sleek forms cutting through the chaotic sky. The hum of their engines was deafening, a stark contrast to the haunting symphony of voices that still echoed in Alira's mind. "They're here," Kale muttered grimly, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer carried. "They'll keep coming," Alira replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But they can't silence us now." She opened the manuscript once more, its blank pages glowing faintly with threads of light. Words began to form, written not in ink but in fragments of energy. "Remember us. Do not let them silence our song. We were here." The message was clear. The texts were not just records of the past. They were a call to action, a reminder that history could not be erased, no matter how hard the Dominion tried. Kale turned to her, his expression a mixture of awe and fear. What do we do now? How do we stop this? We fight, Illyris said firmly. Not with weapons, but with truth, with memory. The Dominion fears what they cannot control, and now they've lost control. Before Kale could respond, the ground beneath them cracked violently, sending shards of light spiraling into the air. The memory core's resonance had reached its peak, threatening to tear the planet apart. We need to stabilize it, Illyris said, her voice urgent. If we don't, everything will be lost. Ow! Kale demanded, his voice rising over the growing hum. Illyra hesitated, then closed the manuscript. By becoming part of it. What does that mean? Kale asked, his tone filled with unease. It means we join the chorus, Illyra replied. Like the scribes. Like everyone who's been erased. Kale frowned, studying her face. And what happens to us? We become part of the song, Illyris said simply. Our voices will carry the truth forward, even if we're gone. Before Kale could protest, the ground beneath them shattered completely, revealing a massive fissure that glowed with radiant energy. Suspended within it was the memory core, its swirling vortex of light and shadow pulsing erratically. Around it, ghostly figures of the silent choir emerged once more, their forms shimmering like liquid glass. One of them stepped forward, placing a hand on Illyra's shoulder. Though their face was hidden, she felt their presence, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. The chorus remembers, the figure said, and now, so must you. With that, the silent choir dissolved into wisps of light, merging with the memory core. The fissure began to close, its edges knitting back together as though the chamber had never been breached. Illyra turned to Kale, her expression resolute. It's time. Together, they stepped toward the fissure, their forms bathed in the radiant glow of the memory core. As they approached, the resonance grew louder, filling the air with a symphony of voices that spoke of loss and longing, of betrayal and redemption, of scars that refused to heal, of a people who had been erased but would not be forgotten. The moment they touched the memory core, the entire world erupted in a blinding flash of light. The texts floating around them coalesced into a single, unified melody, a haunting refrain that resonated with the same chords Illyra had heard in the silent choir. When the light faded, the fissure was gone. The sky above was calm, the stars flickering softly against the velvet expanse. The Dominion warships hovered silently, their engines silent as though frozen in time. Illyra stood alone, her cybernetic hands glowing faintly with an inner light. Around her, the texts were stable once more, their words glowing faintly with an inner light. Kale appeared beside her, his face pale but resolute. What happened? He asked, his voice tinged with awe. We gave the chorus a voice, Illyra replied. Now, the Dominion can't silence us anymore. Kale frowned, glancing at the horizon. The sky was streaked with crimson and gold, as though the very fabric of reality had been altered. But this isn't over, he said grimly. Whatever you unleashed, it's only the beginning. Illyra nodded, her resolve hardening. For the first time in centuries, the voices of the forgotten had been heard, and they would not be silenced again. She opened the manuscript once more, its blank pages glowing faintly. Words formed, written in threads of light. Remember us. Do not let them silence our song. We were here. Illyra closed the book, her resolve unwavering. Whatever came next, she was ready. For the first time in centuries, the voices of the forgotten had been heard, and they would not be silenced again. The silence was only the beginning. The scars of history will become the weapons of tomorrow. Watch closely, for every note in the chorus matters. And remember, the flag still flies. Subscribe now to uncover the secrets buried within the great chorus. Explore the full playlist to piece together the story, one episode at a time. The truth is waiting.